Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. So before we get started, want to level with you guys about something. I haven't been making as many Shadowbringers videos as I initially intended. I mean, Innocence EX and Titania EX still aren't out yet. I did put up videos of us clearing them, and that's useful. That's not the same as making a full-on guide, you know? It's been kind of tough for me. You know, I kind of hadn't anticipated this going into expansion launch. It was on my mind, but I never really thought about it much past, I'll deal with it when I get to it. And it's a rough time of year for me. There's a few times of years that since what happened last year with my father, it's just hard for me to focus, you know, hard for me to really get content on. I always find there's like times where I really need to be in kind of my own space in a sense. And, you know, July 13th was my father's birthday before he passed. And, you know, the whole week I was like, something's really eating at me and I can't focus and I can't get this work done. And then realized it. I was like, that's right. Yeah, always those times a year. It's just, even if I'm not thinking about it, I just can't focus. So this week has not been great for me. Unfortunately, content that normally I have out in like a day or two is now almost 2 weeks, and it's still not out. It's technically more than 2 weeks if you include early access. So it's not been my season. It's my first expansion launch kind of dealing with this because they're always around this time. So I'm sorry to everyone who has been waiting for content, expecting it, asking me when certain things are going to come out. The pressure of that plus my own personal dealings have definitely not led to, I guess, the most grateful of personalities, I suppose. Not the most responsible one either. Just this kind of, I just need space. You know, I just can't be asked this. I can't be asked that. And so even like as I'm sitting here right now, like I'm looking at the questions I know I'm going to answer, like I already know I'm probably going to skip a lot of questions this week to get through this video a bit more comfortably. You know, like questions that I guess I kind of answer frequently I already skip, but like ones that I guess I've kind of beaten into oblivion or maybe brought up last week or things along those lines. So it may just be less questions this week. I'm not going to do a Patreon read either. I'm going to thank some people who did join the list. And I'm going to see, I've been trying to get a credit working, but both the things I use, OBS and Vegas, have just not been friendly to a scrolling list of text. It's like the easiest thing to do. And yet they're being a pain in the ass about it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just dumb. I could go for that too. But first, let's thank a few new people, patron supporters. You guys support me despite the fact that Patreon doesn't really do anything. It's just for the YouTube channel. I am going to get that worked out, whether it be the credit thing, whether it be doing more of the readouts, getting back to that. Something's going to get fixed, and I can promise you guys that. So there was actually a standard sponsor, a standard patron that was added. We have, and I have the names right here, and I almost just closed them by accident. Caramel Macchiato from Cactar, thank you. That's a standard sponsor. We also had 2 elite sponsors join, Alexander and someone who apparently has been on the list, but I just never got an email from them. I checked and I totally got a message, but I never got an email letting me know I got the message from, I just closed the list again, from Pink Kitty of the Fairy server. So big thank you to them for being very patient because they've been waiting for their readout for quite some time. And then a premium sponsor by the name of Darius. So thank you to those who have been added to the Patreon list. And of course, thanks to our patrons of darkness, Khuja, Jenova, and Kurenai. I mean, thank you to all of you, really. I mean, that's why I do the readout, the long readout every week, because I am grateful for every name that's on that list. Even so much so that I sometimes forget to take people's names off the list. And some people have been on there probably way longer than they've actually been on the Patreon. But it's just, I read it and it makes me feel better. It makes me feel like really good. Kind of awkward this moment right here, but it's important to say. But thank you to all of them for supporting even when times are a little bit rough for me. I'll be getting content out. Don't worry. I'll get back on that horse. You know I always do. But with that, I'm going to do some questions this week. Again, if I see certain like very focused job questions, especially jobs that I haven't leveled and that I don't really have personal expertise in, probably expect me to not answer those this week. Maybe next week, but next week I'll probably be a lot more questions about Eden and Eden Normal, maybe some more story-related ones. So let's do some questions this week, and as I'm going, I'll gauge how I'm feeling, and then we'll see where we end up. Alright, question number 1. Hey, Mr. Happy, I hope you're doing well. I'm doing alright. All things considered from the beginning of the video, I am doing alright. My question for you is based around loot, specifically normal Eden. I've heard from multiple people at this point, and the normal raid looting system is supposed to be changing this expansion, but I can't recall where or when this bit of info was announced. Do you know, have any info on this and suspicion of what the changes are? See, I remember Savage changes that instead of being like individual pieces of loot, we'd get coffers for a lot more of the available loot in Savage. I feel like in that same interview they did mention something about normal though, about the token system and it changing as well. It's from an interview. This information is from an interview that came out of the media tour, and I think an E3 interview reaffirmed some of this stuff. I know there was also a light mention that there were changes coming in one of the live letters, either the one from the media tour or the one from E3, but I can't give you an exact one. My best recommendation, and this is going to be a lot of digging on your part, there was someone who made a compilation of all of the interviews and the videos that had been made from the media tour, and they compiled them all into a list, and I'm pretty sure it was posted on Reddit, but it eventually just led to a document on the side. And that is where I remember going through and seeing something. I feel like it's probably from someone I actually know, the question about loot in regards to normal and savage, but unfortunately I can't give you like a solid answer, like exactly the location, because it's just not ringing to me right now. Bonus quick question. By this time in Stormblood, we already knew what the 4.1 Ultimate Encounter was going to be, but so far we have zero information on 5.1. Should I be concerned we may not be getting an Ultimate in 5.1, or are they just keeping secret? We didn't have that information by now in Stormblood. We didn't know that until the live letter after Savage had already been released, and Savage hasn't even been out yet for Shadowbringers. So no, we didn't have this information by now. I gotta double check it. Maybe we did, but I'm almost sure we didn't have it until about 2 months before 5.1 actually came out. I remember them mentioning the ultimate difficulty and then giving us a light teaser and then showing us that it was the unending coil of Bahamut in full in the following live letter. But now I gotta go check, but I'm almost positive we didn't have that information by now. I feel like a lot of it is, ultimate's gonna be a thing now, so this like anticipation for it, this knowledge of its forthcoming is adding to this anxiety that you're having, that you really need to see more about it. But no, I'm 99% sure we did not know about the unending coils of Bahamut at this point in Stormblood. We did not have a live letter that spoke about it, so I'll double check that, but relax, we'll have one in 5.1. All right, next question at Mr. Happy Modays. Don't worry, I can't type. I'm no one to judge. Hey Haps, you doing all right? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Quick question over here concerning the trust system. How would you feel about a boost potion on the Mog station to boost trust to level 80 instead of having to level them? Full disclosure, I don't mind when people use boosts in Final Fantasy XIV. I think if it's the way they've chosen to enjoy the game, it's the way they've chosen. Questions like this, I'll never advocate for more of them. Like, I will never advocate for a crafter or a gatherer one. Heck, I forgot there were even retainer ones until recently. So I'll read the rest, but I can already tell you my personal opinion on this is no, but I do have some thoughts about the trust system, and I will be putting out a video on that. I promise. Listen, despite what I said at the beginning, I promise that's a video that's going to happen. As a father of two, it's a blessing to be able to stop in the middle of a dungeon without bothering anyone to tend to my kids. For the same reason, I don't have much time to play during the week and was disappointed when I learned I'd have to spend lots of hours to level them back to 80 once I finish the main scenario. Thank you for your answer in advance. So of course, one of the big advantages with trust is even though they are slower than players, they don't AoE, sometimes their decision making is questionable, even when they're designed to do the content properly. That they do allow you to go at a personal pace, whether it be to try out a job for the first time in a dungeon, whether it be a personal anxiety where you have issues consistently dealing with other people, or you just have a personal responsibility that's going to draw your attention away from the game, and you don't want to put other people's experience at risk because of that, but at the same time you want to enjoy the same stuff as them. So I totally understand all those, and they're great. The reasons why the trust system is really good. That being said, of course, like I said, I'm not ever in favor of boosts, but I will say I don't think they really needed to make a leveling system for the trusts going back into the main scenario. It's nice for someone like me who does like to have these kind of micro goals to grind towards, and I do think that if you were to take jobs through and just kind of do it solely with the hours you do have, if it's something that you're actually interested in doing and leveling, and your time's already limited to the point where it is that you can't really queue in with other people because you might be pulled away because of that, I think it's still going to work out to be a pretty good pace for you if you just take a couple of jobs up at a time, do 3 dungeons on one, do 3 dungeons on the other, make sure you're keeping your trust adequately leveled while going through and leveling yourself, trying a couple of different jobs out within the same role, 2 DPS, 2 tanks. I think you'll find that you actually will be okay trying to work on them slowly but surely. It'll be a long-term goal for you to work towards, and essentially gives you a lot more leeway and a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? It makes the dungeon content, there's a word I'm looking for that's just not coming out of my mouth. I had it and I let it go. Basically, it'll elongate the means through which you can actually engage in the dungeon content without taking away your ultimate goal of leveling, you know? So which I think is probably a pretty important thing. But yeah, I don't know why they decided to go this route with the trust of having to re-level them. It works for someone like me. It doesn't work for a lot of other people, and I respect that. Maybe they'll make changes to it in the future. That'll make it easier to get their levels versus just boosting them up to 80 immediately. So that way they don't necessarily fall behind you. I wonder if there's ever been consideration of making it so they can sync to the dungeon, but also having like kind of a true level in a sense. It's a lot more work than it's probably worth. I don't know. But I'm definitely not for selling more boosts. I'd rather find another solution than selling more boosts. Alright, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Let's do the next one. Longtime watcher, first time askers have a bonus of all 5-star triple triad deck. You know, they really should just make 4 stars unlimited, because the fact that you can only use 1, 4, or 5 is still so silly. Quick questions. 1, can you duty finder the extreme primals when they first come out, or do you have to party finder them? And 2, have you always been able to duty finder them? So they eventually added something called the high-end duty finder, which used to be called the raid finder. And with that, it always has the most recent EX primals, the most recent savages in there. And I think Ultimate gets thrown in there as well when it eventually comes out. And then things, as they become outdated, they filter out and they filter the new stuff in. On North America and Europe, it's actually culturally not very common for anyone to use the high-end duty finder or the duty finder at all to find extreme level content, extreme or savage level content. It's just not a common thing at all. So while you technically don't have to party finder them, for our culture, not party findering them is pretty much paramount to not doing the content as far as we're concerned. Whereas over in Japan, they use the party finder to practice, and then they go into the high-end duty finder for clears, which is a far more efficient system, which unfortunately we will probably never adapt as Westerners. So odds are you're going to have to party finder them. But you have been able to duty finder them since, I don't remember, you used to not be able to. Or at least not reliably. No, you know what? That's not even true. You always have been able to. Except for, like, the actual raids. Like Coeurl, when it first came out, you had to go to the entrance with a pre-made party. You couldn't, like, filter into a duty finder group. But nowadays, yeah, I mean, that's an option now. So, yeah, EX Primals, you've always been able to do that. You've always been able to duty finder them. It's just nobody does it culturally in North America or Europe. So that's pretty much your best bet. You have to go in through the party finder for us. It's kind of unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. Oh boy, I scrolled through a lot of questions that were, what do you think, a gunbreaker? What do you think, a dancer? And I've spoke about that at great length in the previous one and throughout State of the Realm this week. So I had to actually go past a lot of questions this week, and I feel kind of bad, but here's one I could take. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, I've started playing 14 this expansion. As a long-time WoW player, I feel the adjustment to Final Fantasy has been smoother than I previously thought it to be. That being said, do you think the barrier for entry to newer players is at a good level? Curious to hear your thoughts on it. Thanks. I guess this is another one I've done a million times, but it's one that's kind of, I guess, almost easier for me to talk about because I have a lot more experience with it. So, barrier for entry in Final Fantasy XIV, most of us would agree, is the main scenario quest, which it's weird because the way I feel about the main scenario quest is not barrier for entry, because unlike a lot of other games, Final Fantasy doesn't start at level 80. Final Fantasy starts at level 1. Whether or not people like or enjoy the A Realm Reborn story, it is where essentially the world begins to build. You meet characters for the first time. You have groundwork laid for things like Ishgard, things like the Garlean Empire, things like the Ascians. You know, there's a lot of groundwork laid there that we still dig back to this day. Crystal Tower was, you know, something we haven't dealt with in years and years, and now it's suddenly this major part of the expansion story. And it's great to have all that kind of, it's good to take all that latent knowledge that I've developed over A Realm Reborn and either clarify it or build upon it. So that's the thing about barrier for entry that you're asking about, is because what most people consider the barrier for entry, I consider an integral part of enjoying Final Fantasy XIV. I'm always, you know, I'm someone who does like to rush to max level. I'm someone who does like to kind of dip my feet in as many pieces of content available, whether it be the super difficult raids, the ultimates, the savages, or, you know, trying to dig out and actually level trusts and do all my shared fates, collecting triple triad cards, collecting mounts, collecting minions, sightseeing logs. Like, I've dabbled in all of them, except for like crafting and gathering, but I've started leveling those already, so let's just back off a little bit. And so it's so tough for me to say where I think the barrier for entry is, because it entirely depends on the individual. If it is someone who is, I want to start playing, I want to get to max level, and I only want to raid. I mean, I know a lot of people who are into 14 in that way, and I know what ends up happening, pretty much. You end up doing that, you get through the raids, and you go, okay, I did it. And then you come back when there's more raids, pretty much. Whereas the person who starts, goes through, enjoys the scenery, enjoys the music, enjoys the encounters, even the easier ones, enjoys the world building, the story, discusses it with other players. Those are the people who enjoy Final Fantasy XIV the most. People who want to be engrossed in Eorzea, in Authored, in all the various areas that are available to us. And so I think if you are someone who just wants to get to max level to do whatever, then the barrier for entry is insanely high. Like higher than any other game. But if you're someone who just wants to play, you're like, oh, this looks like a cool game. Oh, it's got a story, it's got voice acting, I can play every job on one character, I can craft, I can do every craft on one character. There's raids, there's primals, there's trials, there's dungeons, there's hard mode dungeons, there's currencies to grind, there's a freaking gold saucer with mini games in it, there's chocobo racing, there's no one says anything about Lords of Verminion, let's not include that. But like, people who are fascinated by all that and all the different facets the game offers, their journey literally begins at level 1, and their enjoyment probably begins there as well, unless there is no barrier for entry for that kind of player at all. So that's my designations. Like, I've answered the question, I guess, but yeah, it's really tough for me to give a fair answer to that question. Alright, I don't usually take character creator questions because I don't give a shit about my character at all. The only reason my character is the way my character is, I let my girlfriend make it, and I gave him sideburns. And I said, whatever you do to the character, that's it. I'll take it, I'll keep it because you made it, because I otherwise just create abominations of mankind whenever I get into a character creator. And Mr. Happy Mondays, yo, how you doing? I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. Simple question. Do you think they might ever change the character creator screen to better give us an idea of what voices we pick for our characters so people don't get stuck with something like Vyre or voice number 7? Because the character creation does not sound anywhere near as bad as does the game. Hey! That's how Vyre or voice 7. I don't know. I feel like I got exactly what I was expecting for when I first previewed voice number 7 in the benchmark. It wouldn't be a bad idea. It would definitely be a lot of work on their end. Everyone who does the voices, which I don't know what the process is for that because it's not in my repertoire of knowledge, but they need to obviously get everyone to re-record. A full sentence would realistically be the best thing to have. Be like, let us be on our way, or let our journey commence. You know, like a full-out sentence like that. As the problem is, they can't do that because our character never speaks a full sentence. So it comes down to grunts and expressions and stuff like that. And it's for that reason precisely why, because my character's already silent, technically, that's why I play with voices off, which is why, again, I don't know why I took this question. Yeah, that's the thing. The best solution is also a solution that gives players a thought that their character will actually speak when your character doesn't. But something, I don't know, some better way. I'm sure there's a better way of doing it. Or they could just fix voice number 7, because I'm pretty sure they've openly admitted something's wrong with it. So, fingers crossed for one or the other. Either better character creator way of judging the voice, or fix voice number 7. One of the two. Alright, this next one's short, and it's the one that I probably haven't spoken about enough. I think I mentioned it briefly last week's episode, but I do want to make a clarification after reading this one. At Mr. Happy Mondays, they made a big deal about there being 9 dungeons at launch, but so far there are only 8. Any idea where the last dungeon is? So let me be clear about this. They didn't make a big deal about it. They mentioned it in passing. We made a big deal about it because we got 8 dungeons every expansion so far. So it was like, holy shit, a 9th? What are they going to do with that? It was like a huge mystery, and there wasn't a 9th. So the possibility right now is either it's part of Eden Normal, I severely doubt that, or it's the treasure dungeon. Or they were including 5.1's dungeon, which doesn't make any sense because they said 9 dungeons for launch. And I can understand saying that for the treasure dungeon or if there's something in Eden Normal, but otherwise, no, it doesn't make any sense. So They didn't make a big deal about it. We made a big deal. So we're the ones, myself and others who have brought up the 9 dungeon thing, we're the ones to blame for that expectation being so high. They mentioned it, but we're the ones who kind of put a lot of oomph behind that. They didn't go about, yeah, 9 dungeons, not gonna believe it. No, that didn't happen. So I think the last dungeon is Treasure Dungeon, personally, at this point. And I think from now on, they should just not list numbers, and I'm going to pay no attention to numbers when they list them. That's what I'm doing going forward. Oh man, there's so many questions about individual jobs and individual roles, and saying I wasn't going to take most of those. I will add a little statement here, because I think that was actually going to be the last question I answer for this week. Obviously, I've explained why this week I'm kind of going a little bit lighter on the questions. Couple of things. Job related, like what do you think about this? What do you think about that? We will be covering those in some opinionated pieces later this week. We will be referencing FF logs at various percentiles and comments from people with a lot more experience on specific jobs and roles than myself as a means of gauging things. We're also going to be waiting to see if there are any adjustments made Tuesday on the Eden normal patch, which usually has some very slight adjustments. I remember in Stormblood it was enmity changes and some slight potency changes here and there. I'm not expecting anything major, but maybe something that covers what some people are feeling about certain jobs. 2 spoiler questions. I saw 3 or 4 of those this week. I will start answering those next week. I know that we already did spoiler cast on Stay the Realm, but I kind of just wasn't mentally prepared to talk about a lot of that stuff here. This is like my worst Mondays with Mr. Happy I think I've ever done, just because of like how kind of down I am on myself. So give me a week to refresh myself, come back, things about jobs, expect videos on those individually, and then we'll probably reference back to those as well, because I'm getting a million questions about various jobs, and I'd like, because I haven't played a lot of them, I don't want to be the guy acting like an authority, and then you go to someone else and, well, he said that. I can only give you what other people give me. People who are experts in the caster role, people who are experts in the tank role, people who are experts in the healer role. Me, I understand 2/3 of the DPS, and I haven't leveled half of them. So I don't want to act like a professional on them. And Shadowbringers, not yet. Only physical range do I feel somewhat comfortable talking about. Mostly Dancer, a good bit of Machinist you saw, and Bard, I'm like 70% confident about talking about that at this point, because I haven't spent a lot of time on it, other than leveling it. But with that, that's going to be a wrap for this episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Again, really sorry for this week's episode being kind of the tone that it was, especially compared to last week where I was super hype and over-energetic. It just didn't carry through to this week with some of the personal things I had to deal with off content, you know. So thank you again for watching the videos, for supporting the channel, and for hopefully understanding the prospect I laid to you at the front of the video or at the beginning of the video. I'm gonna go make some food and hang out and get this rendered and get back to work this week. I promise, I promise, I promise. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next one, and until then, take care.